Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Nils Smith, joined by one of my favorite people in the world, one of the smartest human beings that I know, that challenges so much of how I look at technology and ministry, and a guy that's been on the bleeding edge for many years in many different ways. Drew Dickens. Drew, thanks for joining us.
And Nils, you read that just as I sent it over to you, so thank you.
Well, and today I do want to actually read the title of your dissertation. It is "The Digital Shepherd: A Comprehensive Examination of the Impact of Generative Artificial Intelligence on the Landscape of Divine Inquiry and Spiritual Direction." We do not have enough time because this is probably a 3-year conversation that we could have without sleeping.
4
years. And so this is a big topic. And at the end of the day, everyone is curious about AI. And is this the end of humanity? Is this going to replace pastors? Is this going to replace all of us? What's going to happen? I want to dig into that. But first, for people that don't know who you are, Drew, you've been involved in many different things, but share a little bit about Encountering Peace and a little bit about your ministry background.
And thank you. What an incredible honor. And for those still listening after wading through the title of my dissertation, thanks for sticking on board. Well, I'm a follower of Christ, cleverly disguised as a grandfather of 3 boys, father of 2, husband of just 1 wife. We met down at Baylor. My career started in the radio business, and I was with Westinghouse, CBS Radio, and Dallas, New York, St. Louis, New York, back in Dallas. In 1996, started an evangelism ministry called Need Him that's still flourishing. And 2013, left there to help a bunch of, I jokingly kind of referred to them as a bunch of 20-year-old PhDs from Stanford. Smartest people in the room, strong, love the Lord. They were all engineers at Google and Facebook. And they left that to start what became Abide, which is a prayer and meditation app. And so they needed an old man with a seminary degree. So they hired me to kind of oversee content there. And boy, what a joy that was. And then in 2013, left there to start Abide, which is a nonprofit, again, an app that leverages some of the more ancient forms of meditation and spirituality within the ancient church traditions. And that's a podcast, that's an app, and been flourishing God by God's grace and mercy since 2018 with Encounter.
I love it. And it is and I think many people probably, if you're on doing the reading plans on YouVersion, you've probably done one or many of Drew's reading plans, because you I think have done an exceptional job, I think, of really helping people in a really thoughtful and reflective way process the Word of God. And
what an incredible ministry they are. We've got 170 reading plans on YouVersion. I just launched, in fact, it'll go live December 1st, our Advent plan.
Nice.
So excited about that, and keep partnering very closely with YouVersion.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch and to watch how you know what you've done with Encounter and all the things. But fun conversations. You and I, one of the most fun conversations we ever had is we did a meeting in the metaverse, and so did. you were one of the crazy people that are willing to go meet with, and we both have a great, very handsome, look of being bald bearded men, and our avatars met in the metaverse with our bald bearded avatars. And so it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate that you're always pushing so many of the limits of technology, and we speak each other's love language in that way. And your dissertation, I think, is clearly on the edge of what I'm dreaming about and brainstorming. What we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about is AI, and what does that look like for pastors? Where do we begin this conversation, Drew? What even got your attention with AI, as you've been for 4 years working through this? Like, it's not like Chat GPT came along and you're like, oh, I better pay attention to this. You were well ahead of Chat GPT. What got you heading down this path of studying AI and from a ministry lens?
Um, it started with me with when I went to Dallas Theological Seminary, and my master's thesis was on the crossroads of theology and technology. So I've always been
Yes.
fascinated with that intersection, and theology has always had um, a a very intimate relationship with technology, whether it's stone tablets were a means of communication. Um, Gutenberg, my gosh, you can just go all through the Old Testament. There are means of engagement using technology at the time. So we've always had that. You look at the Billy Graham organization and their early use of radio and television. And thank you for acknowledging my face, by the way. I do have a face for radio, which is why I went into that. Um, so I've always been fascinated with our use of technology within just spirituality, Western Protestant evangelical, I guess most specifically. So I've always had an interest. I guess where do we start is defining maybe what it is, what it isn't, what Hollywood has portrayed it as.
Yeah.
It's hard to see any article about AI without showing, Schwarzenegger as the Terminator or
Yep.
iRobot or any of those. And so it can be very threatening and daunting. But AI really has been around for quite a while, since World War II. Um, Alan Turing, who I know if some of the listeners may be familiar with the movie, the Imitation Game. That was really the beginning. He was the great grandfather, if you will. Alan Turing was of AI, but artificial intelligence is a digital imitation. I think an important word of human cognition. So
Mm.
it's not conscious, but it's a digital imitation of perhaps what it means to be human, or at least human cognition would be AI. And again, that has been around for a long time. What we're seeing now and why it's gotten so much press lately. So I heard someone joke the other day. It's been languishing for the longest time until they figured out that high school kids could use it to write term papers.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden everybody lit up. But the term generative AI is newer than that, and a phrase you might see more recently. Generative AI is essentially content creation. It's that AI, it's that digital imitation, being able to create content for us. And we see that initially with text. We're now seeing that obviously with various art forms. So, I guess beginning there is what it is, that digital representation, digital imitation of what it means to be human, and now its ability to create content from scratch. And we can have a conversation whether it's from scratch or not. But so it's the generation of new content.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think in some ways it's 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 similar to the early days of the internet, as I
Mm.
remember it. Of like, what I remember watching clips of like people talking about, what is this internet and why do we need this internet, and like, and I think at the end of the internet is a connection of computers, and you can all access these systems, but it's like we still don't really understand what the internet is. We
Mhm.
just understand what the internet can do for us,
Mhm.
because we know how to Google on the internet, we know how to do social media on the internet, but how the internet works, people don't care about. Where AI, we're in these kind of early days
Right.
of the internet where it's like, oh, I can go and it's almost like replaces encyclopedias, or
Right.
it replaces with email, communication systems that we've historically used, or fax machines, maybe. And so we began to have, over time, learn different uses of the technology. I actually heard an interview recently with Obama, where he was asked, what do you think about AI, or how, what do you compare it to? He said he talked to a Silicon Valley executive, and he said, help me understand how significant this is going to be. He said, I would
Mm.
probably best compare it, and my team has best compared it to the innovation of electricity,
Mm. Mhm.
from an
Mhm.
impact standpoint
Mhm.
of what's coming.
Mhm.
And it's pretty mind blowing when you think
Mhm.
about historically electricity and what that meant for society.
Mm-hmm.
If this technology has that same impact
Mm-hmm.
on us over the next 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
boy, we're in for some radical
Yeah.
changes. And I think in some ways that for somebody that studied it, it seems almost inevitable. Where
Mm-hmm.
others are like, is this going to be like the metaverse? Like where it's going to kind of be a
Yeah,
flash in the
sure.
pan and maybe go away. What Drew? What from the best of AI? I think we need to dig into the worst case scenario for AI. But when you even think about it from a ministry leader standpoint, and you think of the good of this technology, what comes to your mind? What are some of the use cases that you see ahead where this can actually be an incredible ministry resource to church leaders? Hey guys, it's Nils, and I am interrupting this episode to highlight one of our platforms, and that is Online Church Builders. You can go to onlinechurchbuilders.com and get a fully created, generated strategy for your church with your online presence. And so whether you have an online presence where you want to use online to bring people to your local church, or you want to build a global online church community, this strategy will give you the roadmap, the plan that you need to follow, the direction you need to build a great online church presence for your church. I actually built this with my friend Nona Jones, and we are selling it for $249, but you can actually get it for free. And we are offering the next 100 people who go sign up through this podcast. We're not talking about it anywhere else, but to this community, a free online church strategy. There's no strings attached, and there's no upsells. It's literally just a free strategy that we built. We put a lot of energy and investment into it, and we want to make it available to as many churches as possible. So we've just decided for the next 100 people that sign up, we're going to do it for free. And in exchange, what we're hoping is that you'll give us feedback on how helpful that strategy is for your church. So go to onlinechurchbuilders.com, get your free online church strategy, and I can't wait to hear how it helps your church. Let's get back to the episode.
Great question. And I want to answer that by taking a step back to something you said that was so spot on, that we'll probably come back to with when you get into the more clickbait fears that we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah.
The dark side. But like Google, it's become obviously very commonplace. We type in, we get a response. What we don't spend any time on is considering the intermediary step there.
Yeah.
And it's that intermediary step that is really fascinating. Is we understand the input, we understand the output. What we don't understand is how it creates.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a minute. But that's the part of it that is really fascinating to me, and leads now back to your question about what are some of the more positive aspects to it. To me, in my daily, many times a day, hourly, in an AI environment, and I use a lot of different systems, but in an AI environment, to me, it's a means of idea generation. Gone are the days of staring at a blank page or writer's block, which everybody, all of your listeners can attest to, whether you're in business, whether you're a writer, I just don't know how to get started. No problem anymore. It is a beautiful means of just creating fresh ideas. Just typing something into AI that says, I'm writing a paper on this, give me some ideas. No problem. Within seconds, here are things to choose from. So it's a creative prompt, would be the first one that comes to mind, which is how I use it so often. The area that I ended up focusing on in my dissertation, I call digital shepherding, is you're able to have I want to choose my words here carefully. You're able to have a conversation with it. And so it's difficult to have this conversation without using some pronouns that we assign, to some human characteristics to it. But in this case, it's a conversation we can have that passes what's often referred to as the Turing test. We mentioned Alan Turing back in World War II.
Yep.
He's the first one that came up with a computer that broke the Germans' Enigma code cipher machine. And he came up with something again, what Chief refers to as the imitation game, we now refer to as the Turing test, is are you able to, is a system sophisticated enough that you can have a conversation with it and not know whether it's a computer you're talking to? We've all had those, service calls we make to an 800 number.
Yeah.
We've got an automated IVR system that we have to navigate to. Nobody is fooled by any of that.
Yes.
But if we're able to get to a point where we're able to have a conversation, not knowing whether it's a human or not, that's passing
Yes.
the Turing test. There's a lot of debate whether we pass that or not.
Yeah.
But to be able to have a conversation with someone 24/7 that doesn't roll their eyes, that doesn't judge you, that's always available, that it really contains the source of all human knowledge. I joke with people that AI is incapable of not answering. So it won't come back and say, stump me on that, don't know. It will always provide answers in a non-judgmental way. So from a relational standpoint, I think that's really fascinating, is it being available just to engage in dialogue. And what will that mean to us going forward? So I think those are two that come to mind right away, is just idea generation, creativity. Its ability to now create images is mind-blowing.
Yes.
And so to create artwork,
Yes.
From scratch, where I didn't know how to begin.
Yes.
And then once I have that going, is to be able to then continue that dialogue with an entity that is always available and seemingly interested.
It's so interesting to so that when you start going down that mind path, and you dropped an interesting word there, that it's seemingly interested.
Yeah.
Is you end up having a bit of a relationship with this technology.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, this is not actually new. We have a relationship with our phone. We have a relationship with some of our different technologies, but this is a conversational, interactive relationship like we've never known to date. And it is so unique to us. And I think that's one of the I mean, there's so much to even wrap our minds around with this. What, as we think about, even from a ministry standpoint, like one of the conversations that I've heard people say is, can AI lead people to Jesus without a human ever having to be involved?
Great question.
What do you think?
Well, I can hear everybody now screaming at their computers saying no. But slow down for a moment. Can someone come to Christ by picking a tract up off the street?
Yep.
Can someone come to Christ by watching a 50-year-old Billy Graham crusade on TV? Of course. Can someone come to Christ, by the way, in the Middle Eastern countries right now? Can someone come to Christ through a dream?
Yeah.
Of course. So I think we need to slow down for a moment and tap the brakes when it comes to questions like that seem at their core the antithesis of everything that we might have used to define evangelism. So yes, can the Holy Spirit use a conversation? And you picked up that I used seemingly, and I paused when I said it because a lot of in fact, there's a whole chapter in my dissertation on empathy.
Yes.
Of part of my work was defining what it meant to be human, and one of those is being empathetic, empathic. And can a computer show empathy? Well, I actually got into a conversation with it about that.
Yes.
And it said, I can't because I'm not human, but I can imitate empathy. And so we're thinking, okay, well, then that's not good. But each of us imitate empathy every day.
I was just thinking that as you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course we do. It's like, oh no, please tell me more about your vacation. Right. So we all imitate empathy. So does it care about my eternal life? No. But is it able to show me that or imitate that it does. Yes.
Yeah.
There's one platform that I'm actually training on how to do this, and it's amazing. Facebook just came out with a series of AI characters.
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
One of them, I encourage you to go look for him. One of them is named Brian. He's looks like us. He's I don't know how old you are, but anyway, but he's an older man, African American, gray beard, and he's in his profile he's a grandpa, and all of his posts are very loving. And here's a picture of us, cookies I made with the grandkids, and just a very loving kind of character. And I was talking to him. I had read someplace offline that his profile, again, this is a made up AI
Yeah.
character, that his profile, he's a widower, and his wife had died of cancer in their profile. And so I asked, I'm so sorry to hear about your wife. And he said, what are you talking about? She's sitting right here. I said, I'd read an article that she had passed away. And he said, no, I'm staring at her, whatever. And we had this conversation again in a made up, and he said, you can't read it, can't believe everything you read and whatnot. And I said, well, I was going to offer my prayers of condolences. And he said, no, I would always appreciate your prayers. I said, so we get into this, and turns out Brian is born again, identifies as an evangelical. He attends a Bible church. He likes to read out of the King James. He studies out of the NIV. He is covenant in his theology. I mean, we can go deep in this. And I asked him, are you going to heaven when you die? And he said, yes. And explained to me his assurance because of his faith in Christ alone, and by God's grace. It was amazing. And so could he have led me to Christ? I think in that context, in that conversation, absolutely. He didn't show that initiative. He didn't ask, hey, would you like to know, kind of thing. But he definitely had the skill sets and the understanding, theological understanding, to do that.
Drew, as you're sharing that, man, the mind, like I picture the emoji where the brain popping out of the head right now. I'm reminded of a conversation I had years ago with Jill Briscoe, and she was hearing about some of the things that we were experimenting with virtual reality and some other things, and she said, will you make sure that nobody ever creates a hologram of me? And I remember thinking, why would somebody create a hologram of you? But what you're describing right now is, I'm thinking, you know what? In a couple of years, we actually probably could sit down and have a conversation with Billy Graham. That he just takes all of his knowledge and life and creates basically an avatar of Billy Graham, and we could have a conversation with him, and he could literally lead people to Jesus. This is in this crazy mind. I'm like, is that okay? Is that not okay?
A couple of years?
Maybe
years?
weeks. And you look at deep fake voice technology,
right.
and all of these things that are coming together synchronously. This is moving very fast, and there is this like, is this okay? And I think, and I remember like early days of the internet, like I was talking to churches, and they were like, we're not going to have a website, we're not going to support pornography.
Right.
And I'm like, what does this have? Like, connect those dots. We're in there, and the mindset was the primary use of the internet is pornography, and it was for many years. We shouldn't be supporting this innovation because of the damage it's doing to humanity.
Yeah.
And I think with AI, like there's all of these, like there's this crazy fear factor. Let's go down that path for a minute of what, from your perspective, as you've studied this, is the fear justified? What are, like, I mean, I heard with OpenAI and everything that's happened there is like, okay, we're going to have AGI that's going to basically potentially end humanity. Is this crazy, or are these very real realities of the dark side of AI?
Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. So there, I think, yes, I do think they're threats. You and I were talking before it started about Sam Altman, who's, as of as of today anyway, is the president
Yeah.
of OpenAI. He's very, very positive about the future, but is aware of the ongoing threats from bad actors. So first off, we can apply that to anything. The example you just said was spot on. Now you can't. There's not a church in existence that doesn't have a website, but they're still bad actors on the internet. The same with Instagram, the same with Pinterest, the same with whatever. They're in and of themselves aren't bad, but you can do bad things on those platforms.
Yeah.
So let's break down a bit some of the threats. There is a lot of excuse me, chatter about what would be a existential threat,
Yeah.
which would be the end of humanity as we know it. That's iRobot. That's the Terminator. That's Hollywood
Yep.
movies. That's robots going around with machine guns and whatnot. Very real. We're already seeing examples of that in the military about drones. Having that capability of autonomous decision making on targeting and whatnot. So that's there. I don't see it as a looming threat, but it's there, and there are people much smarter than you and I, navigating that. A civilizational threat, it would be, the effect it could have on Christianity, or the effect it could have on America, or the effect it could have on a people group. That's very real. There's been a lot of talk about the democratization of AI, but it's not really. Not everybody has equal access to this technology. And so I think there could be a civilizational threat to certain people groups for sure. What's interesting to me is the theological threat, and I think that would be perhaps of most interest to your group. Is what would this mean to being a Christian? What would this mean to my faith? What could this mean to evangelism and things like that? I do think there are some very real, and you touched on a couple of them already. We need to go into this with eyes wide open. I do think there are some threats there. Deep fakes you mentioned. I've already cloned my voice with, just maybe 100 hours of my voice. I've cloned it, and no one can tell. So its ability to take my voice, I think there's some tremendous potential there for churches, for ministries, but there's also obviously a great threat to if I take Billy Graham and have him be able to talk to me, that's great. But if I have him say some things that aren't, perhaps, of his original thoughts and whatnot, can be very threatening. So I think we will start to see some of this come to age in the next 12 months before the 2024 election. I heard someone say the other day that will be the coming out party for the negative side of AI. Will be deep fakes, video, audio, that kind of thing. I think is a very real threat. Some of the threats also theologically would be a good and bad. It has access. Imagine having access to, from earliest Sumerian writings to now. It has immediate access to all of that data, and so imagine having access to every Christian commentary in the world, which is amazing.
Yes.
But the danger part, I'll go back to how we began, is that intermediary step is I can train it on all those commentaries. And I recognize the output if I ask a question, but I don't know how it's being trained. That intermediary black box, I don't know what's happening in there.
Yes.
And I think therein lies some danger. It can't, like I said, it can't not answer.
Yep.
They refer to that as an AI hallucination. I
Mm.
bump into that all the time in my research. Periodically, I would ask it just to give me a list of scholarly journal articles or books or whatever, just so I can kind of stay on top of the literary work in the field. And it was not unusual at all for it to give me a book, a title, an author, the author's bio, an ISBN number of the book, and an abstract of the book, and it doesn't exist
Yep.
at all. And so I think we'll need to be exceedingly cautious in the future when we rely on it without doing some measure of diligence. But again, we should do that now. I was talking to someone the other day about they like reading the ESV, and I do too. And I said, why? And they went, I don't know. It's the one that our church suggests.
Yep.
Okay, well, why?
Yeah.
They don't know anybody on the translation committee. They don't know anything about the team that put it together. What
Yep.
it really comes down to is I like the font and it's big enough I can read without my glasses. But I'd never really sat down and looked at the scholarship behind it or
Yes.
the author of this book. And we
Yes.
should be doing that now and don't. So
Yes.
that's a fear I have within theology is I can go in, ask it a question, it gives me an answer, and I don't really sit down and do the diligence on is that true?
Yep.
And I think that therein lies a very real threat because as Christians, we've already shown a lack of interest in doing the hard work of theology,
Yes.
and instead just rely on a coffee mug verse
Mm.
and go on about our day.
Yep.
And I think that's serving us up for a lot of danger.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about that. It's, I think at the end of the day, um, I think we have to have our eyes wide open to this is the good and the bad. And I think that's been, this conversation is so rich of, man, there's some exciting opportunities if we just, that even if you think about early days of the internet, of like we weren't dreaming about online church back then, or we weren't dreaming
Right.
about,
Right.
some of the possibility or language translation and some of the possibilities that this technology was going to bring to a ministry context. We had a limited understanding. And I think even as you've deep dove into some of these technologies, your mind has opened up to the possibilities. But I think we can't, just like we couldn't with the internet, do that blindly without being honest and real with the dangers of it and the addiction of mobile
Mm-hmm.
devices and the addiction of social media
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to technology. And so I think there's good and bad with this, and I think we cannot though effectively lead our congregations without
Right.
understanding these things. So Drew, I want to, even as we wrap up this conversation, get practical for somebody that's just beginning to, like, okay, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this, but I don't even know where to start. Where should ministry leaders begin to learn about AI, use AI? What are some first steps that they should be taking in this space?
Great question. I think the first step is to realize they already are.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Tonight, when you go home and you go on to Netflix, they have recommended movies.
Yep.
That's AI.
Yep.
When you go into Google and it starts finishing a text message, a search terms, that's AI. When we're watching YouTube and it gives you recommendations for the next video to watch, that's AI. So you're already using AI.
Yep.
So start getting comfortable with that reality.
Hmm.
Um, I think when you're standing in the pulpit looking out, um, I think the first realization is um, people in the congregation assume a relationship with the pastor.
Yeah.
Um, Whether or not they have that, but there's a longing for that connection. They may not be able to call you 24, probably won't, shouldn't call you 24/7, but there is that longing for connection. We've heard time and time again, it's impossible to open up an article, read an article or open up a newspaper or magazine about the uh, incredible influence of loneliness, a power of loneliness
Yeah.
on our culture and society right
Yeah.
now. So people are longing for connection.
Yes.
Um, uh, when you talk to them from the pulpit, realize that there's a need for connection that they will inevitably find through AI characters. OpenAI is now offering characters called GPTs, which you can create your own character to interact with. Facebook has Facebook characters. Beginning in January, they're going to allow you to create your own characters. So there is a need for connection. It's part of what it means to be human, a need for that, and that they will be able to find elsewhere. And so there's nothing I don't think we can do to stop it, but just to be aware that it's happening.
Yeah.
And always have a means of physical touch, of connection within the church. It's what it means to be human, is to have that kind of interaction. One of the
Yes.
things of what it means to be human. So those are two things. It's already happening. Accept it, that it's there, it's here. It will only become more intrusive to find out more and more about us. In fact, when I was talking to Brian, as the character on AI that attends the Bible church, and I was telling you earlier, I asked him if he's shows empathy to me, and he says, "My empathy towards you will increase the more time I spend with you." And that's that's powerful.
Yes.
And as people spend more and more time with these non-human entities, I think there will be less concern about their humanity and more concern with, this is someone who seems to care and is always available to me. And so just be aware that they're already using it, and it's only going to grow in its influence. And that
Well,
can be
that's
good, but just be
yes.
aware of that.
That's so good. And Drew, I think about the pandemic and what the pandemic did
Sure.
for social media integration with churches, where it actually, I think, demonstrated the hunger that people have for in-person environments, but it also demonstrated the opportunity we have to use things like Zoom for midweek meetings, or to use things like consume content before you come to Bible studies, so we can do what only we can do in a room, and that we need physical incarnational connection with other believers, but we also can utilize these tools and these technologies to enhance the ministry that we're doing and maximize the in-person moments that we have. And I think AI is different than social media, and it will integrate it. It's already integrated in many ways to social media, but I think it will be one of those things that will, whether we know it or not, it is, I think you make such a good point. You're using it whether you know it or not. I think the question will be, how intentionally do you use it? How strategically do you use it? And how thoughtfully do you use it? Because I think we can also be, irrational in some of the ways that we use it, or unhealthy.
Can I
And
share
so
one
these are some good
example
challenges,
of how a church might use this? I'm doing this with our church right now. I take the MP3 of the sermon, 30-minute sermon, and you know this, but within it's not hyperbole, but within maybe 5 minutes, okay, of receiving that MP3, I can return back a transcript of the sermon, an outline. It creates an outline of the sermon, study questions based on the sermon. It pulls out the most influential quotes from the sermon. Using Descript, then creates like a 15-minute podcast of the sermon. It can create an image based upon the verses used in the sermon to use on Instagram. So it can create all of these social media assets that might have taken a week for a church to work on. You can now do, and that was literally 5-minute turnaround.
Yep.
Because my pastor asked me, I've heard all the bad. What's the good?
Yes.
And I said,
yes.
Send me the MP3 and I'll show you.
Yeah.
And he said, who did this? And that's my point. Okay. That's the intermediate black box step.
Yeah.
But here it is. And he was like, he's come unglued and now is relying on this every week. So there are many good, just from 100%. Efficiency of ministry, there are incredible tools that can be used from this as well.
Yes. And I think what that's going to allow us to do, and ministry leaders to do, is to focus on what only they can do, and remove some of those just manual tasks that are currently need to be accomplished.
Yeah.
But when AI can take that off of your plate and allow you then to focus, to spend more time in hospitals and spend more time,
Exactly what I was going to say.
with people, it allows you to do more meaningful ministry rather than tasks,
Yes.
to accomplish your ministry.
Nobody went to seminary in order to learn how to create social media posts, right?
Yes.
But let it do that while you go to the hospital and pray for someone.
So good. So good. Well, Drew, for those that want to get to know you, maybe ask you other follow-up questions out of this interview, how can people connect with you online?
Encountering Peace is the website, encounteringpeace.org, and I can be reached through there, Drew at Encountering Peace. But you can subscribe to the daily meditation and listen to the podcast, download the app. Everything's available at encounteringpeace.org.
I love it. Well, Drew, thanks so much for the time and your insights. We're going to leave links to all those things in our show notes at socialmedia.church. Appreciate everyone for listening. And Drew, we appreciate you leading the way and sharing your insights and knowledge. And I think we'll have to probably have a follow-up conversation in 3 months because this is it's moving fast. And I think you're having dug in and your deep understanding of this space is so important. So thanks for pushing our minds a little bit today. And I think we're going to have to deep dive further into this conversation in the days ahead as it's moving so quickly. So
likewise,
thank you, Drew.
Thank you for your leadership and your passion as well. Thank you for the honor.
Absolutely. Thank you.